Welcome to Starborn Saga. Get ready to witness humanity's greatest secrets unfold. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. Genetic superiority, as it turns out, is a pretty touchy subject among the galaxy's most elite species, especially when some upstart primitives from a remote solar system show up with their charmingly basic double helix DNA and their adorably simple cellular structure. The Consortium of Advanced Biological Sciences, a group of the galaxy's leading scientific minds, didn't even try to hide their disdain during the annual Galactic Scientific Summit. Picture this: a room full of beings who've mastered the art of looking down their various respiratory appendages at anyone with fewer than 3 DNA strands. Their presentation on lesser species development might as well have been titled, "Why Humans Are the Galaxy's Scientific Joke." The lead researcher, a being whose bioluminescent spots were practically glowing with barely contained amusement, started the show. "Observe," they announced, flashing a grin. "These creatures still rely on natural selection. They haven't even modified their basic genetic structure in over 10,000 years. The laughter that followed spread through the room like a wave of smug superiority, as if mocking humans for their primitive biology. The human representative in the room remained calm, quietly scribbling down notes, very detailed notes. Mind you, the kind of notes that should have made anyone familiar with human history whisper the phrase, "Hold my beer." But the Consortium, drunk on their own genetic brilliance, decided to take things one step further. They wanted to show how genetic engineering was done the right way, so they acquired human genetic samples, all perfectly legal, of course, through various medical research exchanges. Their goal: to prove that human DNA was inherently flawed and that they could improve it. They should have read the fine print on those experimental procedures. Unfortunately, the fine print didn't exist yet, but it would soon. Oh boy, it would soon. First sign that things weren't going according to plan came when the initial test results showed bizarre, inexplicable reactions. Human DNA, it seemed, didn't just incorporate foreign genetic material, it improved upon it. "Impossible," muttered the head researcher, their chromatophores flickering in confusion. "These strands should be breaking down, not adapting." Then came the second sign: the modified samples were behaving in ways that no one had anticipated. It was as if human DNA had taken one look at the Consortium's carefully calculated improvements and said, "That's cute," before deciding to show them how genetic enhancement really works. By the time the third sign rolled around, which involved a very surprised lab assistant and a supposedly contained sample, the Consortium was beginning to realize they had made a rather serious miscalculation. In the observation room, a human diplomat leaned over to a colleague and whispered, "Should we tell them about our junk DNA?" The other diplomat grinned, an expression that would have sent chills down any Earth historian's spine, and replied, "Nah, let's let them figure that out themselves. They wanted to play with human genetics, let's see how they handle the results." The Consortium had set out to prove human genetic inferiority. Instead, they were about to learn a very valuable lesson about poking bears, even if those bears had DNA that had survived everything from ice ages to fast food, and were more than ready for a little upgrade. As alarms blared through the research facility, one thing became painfully clear: this was going to be one of the most interesting quarters in galactic history. In fact, future students would likely look back at this as a case study in just how spectacularly wrong the galaxy's brightest minds could get it. The answer to their confusion: anything but what they had anticipated. Because if there's one thing humans excel at, it's exceeding expectations, especially when someone has tried to prove them inferior. And this was just the beginning. The resulting chaos at the Consortium's primary research facility was something that could only be described as a scientific panic attack, if such a term existed in the official galactic documentation. It didn't, but after these events, multiple species would propose adding it to the galactic lexicon, right alongside terms like catastrophic success and task failed successfully. The modified human genetic samples weren't just adapting to their new DNA, they were thriving, and not in the polite, predictable way that good little experimental subjects should. No. These samples were showing off serious capabilities that made the Consortium's most advanced biotech look like a child's first attempt at protein origami. In Laboratory Complex Delta, a team of researchers watched in horror as their improved human cells began exhibiting an unprecedented level of regeneration. The lead biotechnician, who sported 18 tentacles and looked like they had a severe migraine, stared at the readings, eyes wide with disbelief. "These cells aren't just repairing themselves," they muttered to the increasingly nervous room. They're improving with each iteration. They paused, eyes twitching. They're learning. Meanwhile, in an adjacent lab, another team found that their attempt to boost human immune responses had created something completely unforeseen. The modified cells weren't just fighting off pathogens, they were adapting, incorporating beneficial traits from everything they encountered. It was like watching evolution unfold and fast forward. With a hefty dose of asterisk, anything you can do, I can do better asterisk mixed in. Realizing things had gotten out of hand, the Consortium's Central Committee convened for an emergency session held in what they believed was a secure, human-free environment. Of course, this was ironic considering humans had already found 3 different ways to hack their communication technology, but that would become apparent later. "We need to contain this situation," declared the committee head, their crystalline form vibrating with distress. "These results are fascinating, aren't they?" Then, the unexpected happened. A hollow screen flickered to life, and a human voice cut through the tension. "We've been monitoring your research with great interest," the voice said, calmly. "Your attempts to improve our genetics have given us some fascinating insights into our potential. We'd like to thank you for your contribution to human advancement." The committee members, startled and caught off guard, emitted bursts of bioluminescence as panic spread through the room. How had humans breached their security? Why were they so calm about it? Meanwhile, across human space, research facilities were already incorporating the Consortium's data into their own studies. It seemed that, sometimes, the best way to discover your true potential was for someone else to try to fix what wasn't broken. 3 months later, the first enhanced humans emerged. The Consortium had wanted to improve human endurance, but instead, they had laid the groundwork for adaptive metabolisms that made humanity's previous limitations look quaint. They had tried to enhance human sensory capabilities, but had inadvertently unlocked synthetic processing pathways that even the Consortium's most advanced species hadn't conceived. And the kicker, humans were improving on those enhancements. In a particularly memorable incident, a human researcher published a paper titled Basic Errors in Consortium Genetic Enhancement Protocols, a beginner's guide to not messing up simple gene splicing *. The galactic scientific community wasn't sure what stung more, the content of the paper, or the fact that the paper's methodology was fundamentally sound. This, of course, led to the Galactic Council calling an emergency summit to address the human genetic situation. Representatives from every major species gathered, ready to discuss containment strategies and regulations for this new development. The human delegation, however, showed up late, and by now, everyone should have noticed the pattern. "We've reviewed the Consortium's work," the human representative began, completely unfazed, "and we've identified several areas for improvement. In the spirit of galactic cooperation, we'd like to offer our enhanced understanding of genetic engineering to all species present." The silence that followed was only broken by a soft, suspicious laugh from one of the human delegates. "You want to teach us?" the Consortium's representative asked, barely concealing their disdain. "Absolutely," the human responded with a grin. "Consider it our way of saying thanks for the push in the right direction." The summit quickly descended into chaos, with arguments breaking out about scientific authority, the role of younger species, and of course human biology. Throughout it all, the humans maintained their infuriatingly calm demeanor, occasionally offering helpful suggestions that somehow managed to sound both sincere and slightly sarcastic. As news of the enhanced humans spread, the galaxy's reaction ranged from fascination to outright panic. Some species immediately requested human assistance with their genetic research. Others began fortifying their borders, realizing that conventional defenses weren't exactly effective against humans, who could adapt to any environment in real-time. Meanwhile, the Consortium's reputation took a hit. Their annual report would later describe this as a significant recalibration. But those who were paying attention knew the truth. The Consortium's once proud researchers found themselves cited in human papers as textbook examples of cross-species genetic manipulation gone wrong. The most telling change, however, came from the scientific community. The same journals that had once published papers mocking human genetic structure now began publishing articles about human adaptive potential. One particularly insightful article, from a former Consortium critic, bluntly stated, "In our quest to improve human genetics, we forgot one crucial detail. Humans have spent their entire evolutionary history adapting to change. We didn't give them new abilities, we just showed them new possibilities." In retrospect, our hubris was matched only by our failure to recognize that sometimes the best genetic engineering is the one that evolution has already performed. The human response: they sent the author a fruit basket with a note reading, "Finally, someone gets it. P.S. Wait until you see what we do next." The Consortium's research facility, once a symbol of advanced biological science, was quietly repurposed. The new sign read, *Human Institute for Genetic Innovation. All species welcome. Previous experience not required. And in offices and laboratories across human space, scientists continued their work, occasionally glancing at the infamous motivational poster that had become a galactic meme. It simply showed a DNA double helix with the caption, "Thanks for the upgrade suggestions. We've made a few improvements." The galaxy was learning a valuable lesson about the danger of assumptions, the power of adaptation, and most importantly, why you should always read the fine print before trying to improvise a species that had turned survival into an art form. The galaxy's most prestigious medical journal published Dead What would later be known as the most expensive "I told you so" in history. The paper, authored by a collective of human geneticists, detailed exactly how and why the Consortium's attempted improvements had backfired. The methodology section included helpful diagrams and somewhat unusually memes from Earth's early to 1 What made the publication particularly stinging wasn't the data, though, that was damning enough, but the data acknowledgements section, which thanked the Consortium for providing such an excellent example of what not to do and inadvertently next leap in human evolution. The enhanced humans weren't just surviving, they were revolutionizing Kree. They touched the first hint that things had gone completely sideways. Came during a routine diplomatic function on a high-gravity world. The alien hosts had chosen the location specifically to inconvenience their human guests. Instead, they watched in poorly concealed horror as the humans not only adapted to the crushing gravity within minutes, but proceeded to suggest beach volleyball as an after-dinner activity. The gravity helps with the spike shots, one human delegate explained cheerfully to their wheezing host. Anyone want to join? We can dial it up a few Gs if this is to tame military. Patches across the galaxy began filing increasingly alarming reports. Human adaptive capabilities weren't just limited to passive environmental resistance anymore. They were actively evolving during combat simulations. One particularly notable incident involved a training humans were exposed to a new prototype weapon. The weapon failed to work on the second shot, not because it malfunctioned, but because the humans had already developed an immunity. The weapon's designers were still trying to figure out how that was physically possible when they received a helpful list of design improvements from the human participants in the corporate sector. Companies that had previously dismissed human businesses found themselves facing competitors who could literally solutions. Mid-negotiation, trade agreements started including clauses specifically address spontaneous human adaptation and unforeseen evolutionary adventures. The galactic stock market developed a new phenomenon known as the human uncertainty principle. The mere presence of humans in any business venture caused wild fluctuations in value as investors tried to predict how they might evolve next. Research facilities that had on-seat underway. Human scientists were now desperately trying to recruit them. The waiting list for human genetic consultants grew so long that some species developed new temporal mathematics just to try to optimize the queue. A small but growing number of alien scientists began to study human history, trying to understand how they'd missed the warning signs. They found them in abundance. A species that had survived multiple extinction events adapted to every environment their planet had to offer and managed to turn nearly anything into either food or a weapon. Both in retrospect, one's an anthropologist noted giving enhanced adaptive abilities to a species that specialized in adaptation was rather like giving a quantum physicist a better calculator. The tool isn't the limiting factor, it's just an amplifier for existing The Consortium's attempt to prove human genetic inferiority had instead created a galactic superpower. Humans weren't just using their new capabilities, they were improving them, sharing them, and most worryingly for some, enjoying them. Professional sports had to be completely restructured. The Transgalactic Olympics Committee spent 6 months just trying to define what counted as natural human abilities, before giving up and creating a separate division for enhanced sports. It quickly became the most watched category. In one memorable event, a human swimmer not only broke the record for underwater distance but developed gills halfway through the race. The judges spent more time arguing about whether this constituted performance enhancement than the athlete spent completing the course. The military implications were even more dramatic. Traditional space combat doctrine had to be entirely rewritten. How do you fight an enemy that might evolve countermeasures before your weapons reach them? What good are tactical predictions against opponents who could develop new capabilities? Mid-battle, one military analysts report consistently of the phrase, "Don't start what you can't finish," repeated for 50 pages, followed by a detailed analysis of human adaptation rates that made several senior commanders consider early retirement. The diplomatic corps faced their own challenges. How do you negotiate with species that might literally become a different species during the talks? Several prominent diplomatic added human evolutionary psychology to their required curriculum. Right next to advanced xenolinguistics and emergency protocol development. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed genetic engineering itself. The human approach to evolution, opportunist, creative, and somewhat irreverent, challenged thousands of years of establishatory traditional genetic engineering had focused on precise pre-planned improvements. Humans, in contrast, treated it more like jazz, a framework for improvisation rather than a rigid script. Their bodies weren't just accepting changes, they were riffing on them, creating new variations, and occasionally throng, in the biological equivalent of a solo research facilities, began reporting a new phenomenon: the modified human genetic samples were exhibiting improvements that nobody had programmed. The samples were essential content, their own research and development. It's like they're peering themselves. One researcher complained, "Why input a modification and the genes send back corrections?" The humans, for their part, seemed to be treating the whole situation as an enormous scientific playground. They established the Institute for Evolutionary Innovation, known informally as the Darwin Club, where they offered to help other species explore their own adaptive potential. The application form included questions like, how do you feel about unexpected improvements? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how attached are you to your current number of limbs? Some species were eager to participate, others filed formal protests about humans disrupting the natural order of genetic development, to which humans responded by pointing out that trying to enforce stasis in an evolving universe was perhaps missing the point of existence. The galactic community had to face an uncomfortable truth: they hadn't just failed to put humans in their place, they'd helped them break free of conventional evolutionary constraints entirely. A particularly insightful commentary in the Galactic Scientific Review noted, "We assumed that our advanced genetic engineering would show humans the proper path to species improvement. Instead, they treated our most sophisticated techniques as entry-level suggestions and proceeded to show us what genetic engineering really looks like when you remove the limitations of traditional thinking." The piece went on to suggest that perhaps the greatest contribution of human genetic enhancement wasn't the physical improvements, but the way it challenged fundamental assumptions about evolution, adaptation, and the nature of improvement itself. Meanwhile, human genetic research continued to advance at a pace that made quantum computing look sluggish. Each new discovery led to 3 more innovative shit. In turn, spawned entire new fields of study. The galaxy was learning that there's a vast difference between engineering genetics and understanding evolution. The Consortium had tried to impose their vision of improvement on human DNA. The humans, in response, had shown them what improvement really meant: not a destination, but a journey of constant adaptation and innovation. As one human researcher put it in a widely circulated paper, "Evolution isn't about reaching perfection, it's about being perfectly ready to change." Thanks for the wake-up. The paper's appendix included a detailed analysis of how human DNA had not only incorporated, but improved upon every modification attempt, complete with helpful annotations like "nice try" and points for creativity. But watch this instead. The Galactic Standard Calendar had to add a new designation: BH and IH, before human enhancement and after human enhancement. It wasn't just the humans who had changed the entire galaxy. It's what scholars would later call the Great Recalibration. The Consortium's former headquarters had been converted into the Intrices Institute of Evolutionary Studies. The building's primary lecture hall, where they had once mocked human genetics, now hosted weekly seminars on creative adaptation and dynamic evolution. The human approach: the waiting list was longer than some species' lifespans. In a delicious twist of irony, the same researchers who had attempted to fix human DNA were now remedial classes taught by human geneticists. The curriculum included such basics as why status improvement is an oxymoron and embracing chaos, the building block of true evolution. The humans had established what they called the genetic open source, sharing their discoveries with any species interested in exploring their own evolutionary potential. The application process included a mandatory course on evolutionary ethics and a surprisingly difficult test on Earth mystery apparently understanding Human humor was deemed crucial to grasping their approach to genetics. One particularly successful program was titled Evolutionary Jazz, Improvising with Your DNA. The course description read, "Learn to stop worrying and love the mutations previous. Experience with genetic engineering, helpful but not required. Sense of humor, mandatory." The military implications had settled into what strategists termed the new normal, though there was nothing normal about it. Combat simulations had to be completely redesigned when it became clear that humans weren't just adapting to threats, they were adapting to potential threats before they emerged. "It's like they're evolving preemptively," one military analyst complained. "How do you plan against an enemy that develops countermeasures to weapons you haven't even invented yet?" The answer, as many were learning, was you didn't. Instead, you signed up for the human-led adaptive defense initiative and learned to evolve your own solutions. The waiting list for this program was so long that several specially new forms of suspended animation just to survive until their application was processed. Corporate passes underwent their own evolution. Business schools added new courses, like adaptive negotiation tactics and evolution-based market analysis. The most successful companies were those that adopted what became known as their human flexibility model, organizational structures that could evolve as rapid liars. Their human partners, the insurance industry, nearly collapsed trying to assess the risks of dealing with asp that might spontaneously develop new organs during a routine physically. Eventually created a new category, human uncertainty coverage, with premium shut adjusted in real time, based on observed adaptation rates. But perhaps the most profound changes were cultural species that had prided themselves on their genetic purity for millennia were now debating the merits of adaptive evolution. Young members of traditional ecovivre races were sneaking off to human genetic clinics, returning with imp that scandalized their elders and sparked intergenerational debates about the nature of progress. The humans, for their part, seemed to be enjoying their role as the galaxy's evolutionary catalysts. They established the Galactic Evolution Foundation, which they insisted on abbreviating as GEF, because, as one human explained it, sounds like something you'd name a friendly alien in a children's book. The Foundation's mission statement was simple: because staying the same in an evolving universe is the only real genetic failure. Their first major project was shaping a silicon-based species. Achieve carbon-silicon hybrid biology, something the species had been trying to do for millennia. The humans did it in 6 months, mostly as they claimed, because some said it was impossible, and we took that personally. The project's success led to a flood of applications from other species. Seeking similar assistance, the humans established a priority system based on what they called evolutionary urge. Cosmic irony: potential species that had previously mocked human genetics found themselves mysteriously moved to the bottom of the list. In medical centers across the galaxy, human genetic consultants became the most sought-after specialists there. Waiting rooms were filled with beings of all descriptions sick, hoping to unlock their own evolutionary potential. The humans approached each case with a mixture of scientific rigor and what they called creative biological jazz. "Your DNA is like a one human geneticist explained to a confused group of crystalline beings. "The Consortium tried to play our instrument for us. We showed them that we'd been practicing for millions of years. Now let's hear your song and see how we can help you improvise." The galaxy's premier scientific journal, which had unpublished papers dismissing human genetic potential, now dedicated entire issues to what they called the human evolution revolution. One particularly notable paper was titled "From Laughing to Stock to Lock Talk," a comprehensive analysis of how we got it so spectacularly wrong. The conclusion read, "In our attempt to improve human genetics, we ignored the most fundamental principle of their evolution, the ability to turn any challenge into an opportunity for advancement. We didn't give them new abilities, we simply showed them new possibilities. They did the rest themselves and then showed us how to do it too." As the galactic year drew to a close, the Interstellar Scientific Committee held its annual awards ceremony. The highest honor, traditionally reserved for lifetime achievements in genetic engineering, went to humanity as a whole for revolutionary contributions to the field of evolutionary biology and for teaching the galaxy to dance with DNA. The human acceptance speech was characteristically brief. "Thanks for the push. Now who's ready to really start evolving?" In the aftermath of the ceremony, a junior member of the former consortium was overheard asking a humane geneticist how they had managed to turn such a catastrophic attempt at humiliation into a galaxy-wide revolution. The human smiled, that same smile that had become famous across thousands of worlds, and replied, "You tried to show us our limitations instead. You helped us demonstrate that limitations are just suggestions, waiting to be evolved past by." The way, have you considered adding some flela there, more useful than you'd think? And so, the galaxy continued its dance of evolution, now led by the species they had once tried to improve. The humans kept pushing boundaries, breaking paradigms, and occasionally developing new appendages just to see if they could define a line. Came when the Consortium's former headquarters was renovated above the entrance in letters visible across the spectrum of galactic vision. They mounted a new motto: evolution isn't about being better than others, it's about being better than you were yesterday. Below items, slightly smaller text P.S. Don't poke the bear. The humans had not just served the attempt to improve them, they had turned it into the greatest evolutionary leap in galactic history, and they were just getting started. In the end, the galaxy learned what Earth's history had been teaching all along: humans don't just adapt to survive, they adapt to thrive, and if you give them a new tool, they'll not only master it, but probably use it in ways you never imagined it possible. As for the Consortium members who had started it all, they eventually enrolled in human-led genetics engineering courses. Some even graduated with honors, though they had to evolve a better sense of humor first, and somewhere in a secure archive, the original research proposal that had started it all was preserved now, bearing a simple stamp in human handwriting. Thanks for the upgrade, here's yours. In return, you're welcome.